What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller and Tarek LaCour from Hook'emHeadlines.com. We're coming back at you today. I've calmed down a little bit since watching the game and wanting to just kind of blow everyone up. But yeah, we're coming back at you after a bad game for Texas on the hardwood. What was it? Yeah, 116 to 103 loss to Kansas State. I can't believe I'm talking about a Texas hoops game saying 116 to 103. I've covered the NBA, and so I've mentioned that score plenty of times. Never in a college hoops game. Just some quick stats. I'll be honest, I haven't really looked out on the social media sphere that much. All the stats I've been pulling together are things that I was researching on my own. That's been plenty enough for me. Texas allowed the most regulation points of any ranked team since 2010, the most points for the program since, I believe it's 1991 against Georgia Tech, the most regulation points. The most points, including overtime, was in like 98 against Texas Tech. And just in general, they just crossed the threshold of when they got beat 100. It was like 115 to 65 by one of Wooden's UCLA teams. So this is not the same breath you want to be speaking in with the number 6 Texas team that was looking to get its first Big 12 win at the Moody Center. But you know, I like there's positives in the offense, but it's the same positives for the offense that I think you could have spoken of for the last 5 games. The only difference is Tyrese Hunter looked better, and the front court was a little diminished. I've given my overarching piece on this. I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, ugly. It's weird to call a game ugly when there's 219 combined points, but from a Texas perspective, that's just kind of the word that I'm going to use. I mean, the defensive effort was poor. Just so many. It was a combination of bad defense that led to wide open and Kansas State just being unconscious. So it was almost demoralizing to a point where Texas would maybe string together back-to-back stops, start feeling pretty good, get a bucket or two, and then Kansas State would hit, some wild three. But when you go through the numbers, they're pretty historical for both sides. I mean, Kansas State shot 60% from the field, 54% from three, and 94% from the line. Just really incredible. After that first half, I was hoping they were going to come back down to earth and Texas was going to play with a little more effort, a little more hunger. That didn't happen because the Wildcats scored exactly 58 points in both halves. Offensive clinic from a team and a program that we don't really think about in this way on the offensive side of the ball. As for Texas, in the 5 games before this under Rodney Terry, Chip Brown actually did a piece on this. It's been trending towards better offense paired with worse defense. If you look in the 5 games under Rodney Terry, Texas opponents were scoring 15 more points per game than they were against in the 9 games with Chris Beard at the helm. They were shooting 3% higher from the field. But the Texas offense is also playing better. So it was kind of a give and take. And that finally came back to bite them in the butt today where, Texas had a historic offensive performance themselves. We're talking about putting up 103 points in a Big 12 conference game. Unfortunately, they just couldn't get any stops and really didn't make it close at any point. If you're a Longhorn fan, I don't think you even felt a glimmer of hope, really, besides the first couple minutes of the game. So really disappointing because if you told me before the game started that Tyrese Hunter was going to have 29 and Marcus Carr was going to have 27, I would say, wow, like you're going to sit back, relax. This is going to be an awesome game to watch, and Texas is going to win by 15. Certainly did not happen, and that's why the box score can be a bit deceiving. But yeah, just really, really poor performance that hopefully doesn't linger is all I'll say. I mean, Big 12 play, if you let things linger, you will start stacking up losses quickly. So you got Oklahoma State this weekend, and Texas has to be ready to come out and play and throw this one away. I think it might. I mean, you got to watch the tape and you got to see what you did wrong. But that old adage of burn the tape, bury the tape, and never look at it and just chalk that up as, kind of a fluke. You might have to do a little bit of that, because I don't know mentally how this team recovers from giving up 116 points to a Kansas State team that through the first 14 or 13 games of the regular season was pretty average on offense.
Yeah, this is concerning in multiple ways. Before I jump in and give props to Kansas State, because props are due to Kansas State. I mentioned that in my post-game piece. For any Kansas State fans out there, I don't think that we've been giving off this vibe, but I'm not trying to come at this by like Texas just played terrible, Kansas State is nothing and everything like that. No, that's Kansas State's best players came to play, and like 100 times beyond that were just scorching on offense. So anyway, I guess I just give my props to K-State. I don't like the Longhorn Network commentators. I'm sorry. I'm just going to come out and say it. They pronounce names wrong all season. I don't know who was on color commentary in this game, but he was just making up stuff, making up terms. Kind of tired of hearing Skip to my Lou. I don't know if anyone was watching the game. And I mean, I just would like people, maybe this game, this was a good game to be on Longhorn Network. But, as a whole, I'll be happy when that's done. Yeah, props to Kansas State, Keontae Johnson, Marquise Noel, tremendous. Noel's a player, man. He leading the Big 12 in assists per game already coming into this one, and he torched Texas. They couldn't get a read off him off the dribble to save their lives. So, props there. My big things here. You got to take this from the top down. I agree with you when you say you just can't watch the tape. I almost feel bad. I'm thinking I might take some of it down. I included some film on the post-game piece of like what Texas did wrong, but it's like I picked 4 clips and there's like 50 you could. And so I don't know. I mean, it seems like a moot point. I think you have to look at this almost from a numerical perspective for Texas, just to say, okay, that was horrific. And I mean, yeah, effort just has to be better. I don't need to get into all the details here of like Texas was lacking with help defense. I mean, I think that was a huge issue. Texas was slow on closeouts, mistiming help defense, was not good in recovery, was not switching effectively, couldn't cover the pick and roll. Off ball, they were asleep. Yeah, and Kansas State made them pay at every turn. One stat that I find interesting that just kind of goes to show how difficult it was to pull off what Texas just did. Texas allowed 33 free throw attempts. Kansas State made 31 of them. Of a team that's made 31 free throws and scored at least 100 points in all of college basketball, that has happened 8 times since, I believe it was 2010. And more than 110 points with that, fewer than a half dozen times since the turn of the century. There's not enough time in a college hoops game to really be able to pull that off. I mean, and usually you're doing it for some reason or another to prevent a team from scoring, but for Texas, it just wasn't working. I don't really know. But, we mentioned earlier what we do to fix this. I don't really know. But I do have some adjustments that I would like to talk about as a whole that might be able to just help the team. I don't know if there's anything you have on that.
So I would say I think two things can be true. Texas defense played poorly, and Kansas State had a historically, unprecedented day shooting the basketball. Like you said, props to Kansas State. I mean, Marquise Noel was absolutely awesome, but every shot that dude took seemed to go in. And at the collegiate level, even when you leave guys open, sometimes they're not going to beat you this bad typically. It's not the NBA where if you leave someone open, they're going to knock down a shot. Texas just paired, the night to have their worst defensive performance with the night Kansas State decided to have their best offensive performance. And those things obviously have some correlation there. But I don't think just because Texas gave up 116 points tonight means that we should think that the Longhorns are going to continue to be a team that's given up, 90 or 100 points in conference play. I think this is somewhat more of an aberration. Clearly, this team doesn't guard the same with Terry as the acting head coach. I think we should kind of expect that going forward. But I also wouldn't completely shift and say one of the worst teams in Division I. I mean, this team was built to scrap on the defensive end of the floor and, really be hard-nosed. And I think the collective coaching staff is going to, preach that, and I think they're going to be able to turn it around. But I would say one interesting point before we offer some solutions going forward is if you told me, during the Shaka Smart years, basically, during the Shaka Smart years, at least me personally, and I think a lot of Texas fans as well, are always saying, like, can we not be this team that plays games in the 60s every night? Like, can we just get like a run and gun style where we're shooting a lot of threes, getting up and down the floor, and you're going to have some losses where the other team scores 100+ points, but at least you're going to be fun to watch. That's kind of reared its ugly head tonight because, like we said, I mean, this was a super up and down game with a lot of good play on the offensive end of the floor by teams, but, be careful what you ask for, I guess me specifically, because this was not as fun as a 64-63 win, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to. I'm not trying to bring up like Chris Beard versus Rodney Terry here because that's not where I want to lead this conversation. I don't think that's where anyone would want to lead this conversation. But I mean, Texas was allowing around 55 points per game prior to Terry taking over as the acting head coach. I haven't tallied up all of the points. It's looking all like it's not double, but it's like 80% more. It's a lot more. So I think to take a step back and to say, okay, what do you need to do to succeed in the Big 12? And what do we largely consider a success? Because the first thing that comes to mind for me, sorry, I'm shouting. I need to stop looking at numbers because it's starting to aggravate me again. I get really into it. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is if we are going to have these sorts of defensive laps, like not to this degree, I don't think that this is going to happen again, but I mean, it scares me to play a team like Kansas. The one thing that can't happen again is all these like some of the offensive scoring droughts. We're not seeing them as much anymore, but you're still seeing shades of some of the issues that we had last year, forcing touches inside, ISO ball, when one of the things that does frustrate me if I'm talking about ISO ball is that, it seems like we're going on a streak of 3 or 4 minutes of solid ball movement on offense, really finding a few set plays that really work. And then we go into 5 straight possessions of ISO ball, seemingly for no reason. That was an annoyance on offense in the first half, but I don't really have any complaints about the offense in general in this game. You can't have these offensive lulls if the defense is going to be averaging, let's say, in the ballpark of 85 points per game allowed in the Big 12. I can't believe we're saying this, but Texas might be in a spot where like the goal now is to allow 80 or fewer against the better teams.
Yeah. I think speaking to your original point there, especially in the first half, midway through when Kansas State jumped out to that, 12 to 15 point lead, the offense, it seemed like we were trying to hit that 10-point shot. And, Dylan Mitchell was taking 15 footers and we were forcing stuff up into the clock. I think this team's talented enough. They've proven it. I mean, they scored 103 points tonight. There's no need to force offensive possessions. I certainly that early into the game, there's no reason to play to what the scoreboard says. If this team runs their offensive stuff, they're going to generate good looks and they're going to knock down those good. So I thought that was a bit frustrating early. Texas wasn't able to close the gap because, shockingly, in this game, they had some flaws on offense that was leading to bad possessions that Kansas State just took advantage of and seemingly ran down the floor on every miss and put the ball right in the bucket. I mean, those two things definitely correlate on misses. The Wildcats are just pushing the ball and getting right to the rim or kicking out to open shooters.
Yeah, I mean, they were beating us. The pick and roll was an issue for us in the first half, and just honestly, like them getting the ball out in transition and getting open shots. But yeah, the offense. There's a lot of talent on this offense. I'm not going to dig too deep into this right now, because there'd be plenty of time to do that. You mentioned Dylan Mitchell with the open shots. I was actually thinking about that today and how much his draft stock has been hurt in the last month or so because his inability to extend his offensive game. I really liked the idea about a month ago of him taking more of these 15-footers and start. His jump shot fundamentally looks all right. I don't think there's that much wrong with it. Technique's pretty good, but he just isn't taking enough of them. And if they're executing it the right way, I was a fan of trying to start to pull his offensive game out a little bit more. But I mean, if we're talking about Texas needing to maximize every offensive possession, I think you pretty much throw that strategy down the crapper. Yeah, I guess, I mentioned a couple adjustments to make, and one is, like I said, I think you just kind of have to take a reset and say, what's our defensive goal now in the Big 12? And saying that we need to get fewer than 80 points per game allowed might seem like is a little bit of an overreaction. But I will say, against the better teams in the Big 12 and when you're playing at a faster pace, yeah, that's probably the goal you should have. And the rest, it should be probably around 70 to 75. Kind of like they had against OU. The other thing is, I just think that the defensive philosophy, they're pulled out way too far. I don't really know what this defensive structure was tonight, or an extreme lack thereof if we're talking structure. But I mean, players just seem kind of in no man's land a lot of the time. There wasn't really anyone in the right place to provide help defense. And the one time where I actually felt confident when Texas had good defenses when they were starting to pack it in a little bit more. And, maybe that allows some guys on the perimeter on Kansas State to get a little bit more space. But I'm going to use a football term here and say, keep the play in front of you. Texas was given up too many points in the paint, 42 points in the paint. It's not going to win you games. And so keep the plays in front of you. Start there. At least you can contest every three. You know where your help defense is coming from. You're not going to get beat down the lane too fast. I mean, I probably would have said make that adjustment a little bit earlier. I get that you can pick that apart by saying that they're just going to try to hit more threes, but Texas was able to contest a little bit better actually when they were packing it in. So that might be a strategy for the future.
Yeah. I think what Coach Beard preached the season plus that he was in charge is, cut the floor in half. When the ball goes to one side of the floor, you keep it on that side. And tonight that didn't happen at all. Kansas State was able to switch the floor, which gets the defense off balance, with ease. And Texas's rotations were not good when the floor was switched, but you don't even want to get yourself in that situation. I mean, if you can keep the ball on one side of the floor, then like you said, the ball's in front of you. Everyone's playing kind of that way. And then, if a guy beats two defenders and gets into the lane, so be it. But there was just way too much space to operate. And, credit to Noel because he's, a super shifty and creative offensive player, but it was way too easy. And, I think philosophy and effort are the two things that need to be talked about here because neither was strong tonight against Kansas State, and there needs to be a change on both. My final point on the defense would be I would almost like to so that Texas doesn't have a unfortunately Tyrese Hunter has not been that Courtney Ramey type defender. I was really bullish in the offseason on Hunter being able to come in and, lock down the other team's opposing guard, just get after him for 90 feet. He's not as long as Ramey. He's not as experienced as Ramey, and he hasn't brought that so far. I would like to see Texas, just try to gain the other team's best one or two players and make the other six guys beat you. Because in both Big 12 games, we saw it tonight with Johnson and Noel. Is it Noel or Noel?
I think it's Noel. I don't know. I'll be honest.
But regardless, they were the clear catalyst of this offense. They combined for 64 points against Oklahoma. Grant Sherfield, who we knew was Sooners' best player, had 22 points. He did a decent job on him, but he had 22, and Jacob Groves had 17, two of the better scorers on the team. I would like to see Texas really challenge, whether it's a Serge Rice, Marcus Carr, Tyrese Hunter, Timmy Allen, whomever, to completely lock down the main or secondary options on the offensive end and make other guys beat you. Because right now you're kind of getting torched by the best players. Obviously that happens. That's what best players on teams do. But there's a way to limit them. And these quote-unquote best players on the opponent are scoring more than their average against Texas right now. So I think that's certainly an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, stopping Sherfield, like you mentioned, is one thing. Even stopping Keontae Johnson, I mean, he's a 43% shooter from three. So Noel, I think, just went off this game. But you're right. I mean, we're seeing game after game after game, teams' best players getting the best. And, I mean, against a team like Oklahoma State, that doesn't bode well when you're facing John Michael Wright and you're facing Avery Anderson. When you're I keep mentioning Kansas, but when you face Kansas, I don't want to think what like Wilson and Dick and all those guys are going to do to Texas because it's not going to be pretty. One of the issues that I do have with Texas on defense, and I'll wrap it up here because there's a ton of issues you could have. Maybe you get Cunningham and even Anamikwe. I don't know. Arterio Morris, get more length out there against a guy like Keontae Johnson, who's a bigger body. He was bullying some of the Texas guards at times, or just getting up and over them. He had a step. He had a way around. He had a way to create his own shots and create separation. And I say he was quicker. He wasn't quicker. He's not that fast. But, yeah. I'm stumbling over my words at this point. So
I would say, I mean, I'm not just trying to throw shade for no reason, but Keontae Johnson reminded me. I mean, he looks like what I wish Timmy Allen was almost. It's kind of like harsh criticism to say, but like a 6'5", 6'6". Johnson's a little bit more of a guard, but guy who can get a rebound, run the floor, can score at all three levels, really in control of his game. He's super impressive and a guy that's probably going to be a first or second team All Big 12 player this season.
He looks like a more mature version of what he did at Florida before that, like really, really, really unfortunate and scary injury a few years ago. And I'm happy for him. I really am. It's a fantastic story. But you're right. I mean, as far as Texas is concerned, like that's the sort of guy that you need, just a next level defender. I don't really know why this is where I would hope that a guy like Dylan Mitchell was a little bit more impressive at this point. That's the type of guy that you would probably need to defend. Because again, there's other matchup advantages you could have had. But yeah, I would like to see the defensive matchups just honestly tended to more. It feels lazy. It feels like there's a lack of effort, even from the coaching staff. Like when you're seeing like the defensive matchups that they're ending up with there and the sloppiness of the off-ball defense, it was straight up pathetic tonight. But in general, it's been pretty bad the last few games. OU was all right, but again, some of their best players torched us because we weren't as disruptive as we were in the first half of the non-con, and help defense recovery still is a little bit lacking. So, all right, well, I'll try to leave this on a high note. The offense was good. Oklahoma State plays some really sloppy basketball, so I think you have an opportunity here to get yourself together with about 4 days off and come back and get a big win and try to get this thing back on track.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd leave it off, I think it's going to be interesting to track. You mentioned you mentioned coaching staff a little bit lazy with defensive matchups and such. You have to remember that you're down 15% of your coaches. Of the 6 basketball coaches, one not being there hurts a lot more than one football coach or analyst not being there. So I'd be interested to see if we can start to chart how Texas plays with more rest, because I think that could be a difference. Whether I'm just grasping at straws here, or if you give the coaching staff 4 days, they're going to have ample time, but on 2 days or 3 days turnaround, you maybe not have enough time, enough bodies to even scout and game plan. Like I said, I could be grasping at straws there, but
yeah, I mean, but I'll be honest, this is where I would like players like Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen, Christian Bishop, that are supposed to be decent defenders, to be able to step up.
Yeah.
You need that vocal leader. You got, goddamn, what? All of them are super seniors. I get what you're saying, and I'm not trying to argue with you there, but like, I get when there's defensive slip-ups every once in a while. I'm not saying that the defense is going to be perfect, but like the points per game differential shouldn't be like 35 points per game between Terry and Beard like it is right now. That's too drastic. And
sorry to cut you off, but at some point, someone in that huddle, it just got to say, F you, F you, F you. Like, I'm lacing up my shoes and I'm guarding these guys, because we cannot let this happen. First loss in the Moody Center. Absolutely. Like you said, leave it on the high note, but that was embarrassing. And the more I talk about it, the more, like you said, look into it, the more angry you get. But yeah, someone with all that quote unquote leadership and experience, someone is just like, what are we doing here? Let's just get in a stand hard.
This one more felt like the defensive attitude of Marcus Carr and Marquise Knoll just, picked up a basketball outside the Moody Center at like 3 o'clock and we're like, hey, you want to run fives?
Yeah.
Kind of more what it felt like. So, but
yeah.
Anyway, let's keep this one from going a little bit too long here. Like I said, maybe not completely ended on a high note, but there is a legitimate opportunity on Saturday to right the ship, and that's what Texas has to do. So, hoping for that. And I'll be honest, and this is me personally, I give my own personal fan take way too much, but we're for a fan site, so whatever. I honestly do hope Oklahoma State loses on Saturday, if that means that Texas, I'm an Oklahoma State grad, I mentioned that a ton, an Oklahoma State fan at heart, but if this means that Texas gets back on track and we get to watch good basketball again, especially on defense, so be it. So that's my take. All right. Well, we'll be coming back here later this week with more on football. Because we got a lot coming up between recruiting and portal is about to heat up. Wow. Anyway, for Andrew Miller, Shane Black at Hook'emHeadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Welcome.